Hey everyone, I'm Dominic, the lead programmer and game developer at Sillyhead Studio. We are a small indie game studio founded in the Czech Republic, but today our team is spread across the world. For the past 3 years, we've been developing a platform called Tonicum. And we finally decided it's time to start sharing our journey, not just through short videos, but with longer devlogs too. So if you are curious how a game like this is made, you are in the right place. So Tonicum started after the PTIT, the game jam with the team out of money, where during 30 days we created this masterpiece. In the game, the character explored a procedurally generated world, which was made of floating islands, searching for artifacts to sell with a main objective: survive as long as possible, meaning always having at least some money. If you want to learn more about this version of the game and the game jam itself, including how it went and what we had to go through, you can find that in the previous video on our channel. I'm really excited to finally introduce Tonicum to you. Just like other games that started from small prototypes such as Hollow Knight or the upcoming Terrageist, Tonicum began as a small idea and slowly evolved into something much bigger. I could honestly talk about this game for hours, but in this video I focus on the core mechanics, early concepts, and the basic information you need to know. The game consists of exploring a vast world which has behind it a rich history and everyday procedural changes. You as the player live in a village full of anthropomorphic animals where everyone has their own role. There are different races and professions, whether wolves, foxes, bears or raccoons, who can do merchants, blacksmiths or alchemists. You play as a raccoon who is training to become an alchemist. Even though the history of our world is very rich, I don't want to go too deep into it to avoid spoiling the story. For the beginning, it is enough to know that there existed one large kingdom, which split into main parts: the Pardo Kingdom, where the different animal races live, and the second faction, a group of dragon creatures. And these two factions were in state of war with each other. Outside the kingdom there are islands which change every day. These islands are generated separately for each location, and as you can see on this map, there are locations such as forest, plains or desert. And in this location the player can find various herbs, minerals or even dragons. Dragons in our world take the role of ordinary animals that live in the wild mass. Most of them, however, have to some degree magic abilities or are influenced by magic, which is reflected in their appearance and traits. Because the player consistently travels into these untamed regions, danger is always present, not just from dragons, but from magic itself, which flows through the world and shapes everything around it. Our game is mainly inspired by titles like Hollow Knight, Celeste, Potion Maker, Tonic and Ancients of Senar. But the inspiration doesn't stop at games, it also comes from books, films, TV shows and even manga. If I had to highlight one major influence, it would be One Piece, especially in terms of world building and focus on the joy of the adventure. Most of the plants you see in the environment, which serve mainly as visual scenery, are inspired by plants of the real world, which can be said more or less about the entire content of the game levels. This approach allows us to create a world that feels grounded and cohesive. The next step in location design is to introduce magical elements that make this grounded world more interesting and unique. From magical herbs, players can craft different potions. For example, combining a healing plant with a bottle of water allows you to create a healing potion, which can be used to restore your own health or even heal an NPC. With these usable items, we aim to give players as much freedom as possible. allow them to experiment and truly feel the freedom of choice. This often leads to some weird and sometimes funny situations, and yes, you can heal enemies too. I will let you decide what to do with that. As I mentioned before, dragons in our world mostly function as wildlife. Although many of them are capable of using magic, players can encounter dozens of different dragon types across the map, each behaving in its own way. Some may be friendly, other aggressive, and some simply try to defend themselves. This allows us to create a large variety of enemies with unique behaviors. One example is this cute dragon chicken. Its passive enemy, meaning it's not aggressive, it simply walks left and right, and when it hits wall, it turns around. However, if it takes damage, it panics and starts running around everywhere. It is therefore a simple creature that the player can easily neutralize, but there are also other dragons that are much stronger, smarter and harder to kill. Because of that, the player must always stay alert when encountering such a weak dragon, because it usually means that stronger individuals are nearby. You are probably also wondering how magic works in our world. I won't go into much detail, but it's important to know that magic is a kind of omnipresent energy. In high concentration, it becomes visible and appears as a purple glow. This magical energy is behind many conflicts of this world, and it is studied by one of factions of alchemists called the mages. They inside the kingdom study its properties and try to connect it with technologies and invent new, more powerful devices. Player movement is very dynamic. Besides classic movement, the player also has magical abilities which they can gain during the progression of the game. One of them is dash. It can be used in up to 8 directions, allowing the player to reach heights that can be reached with a normal jump. Then there are also other elements which the player can use while moving through the environment. On the map, it is possible to find various natural objects which can help the player with movement. One of such objects are, for example, white zones, which can shoot the player in the direction in which they are blowing. Even though the game takes place in post-apocalyptic fantasy world, do not expect dark and gloomy colors. Our overall tone of the game is positive, colorful and playful, with a huge emphasis on the feeling of joy from adventure and discovery. As you have surely noticed, we bet on 2D pixel art. This allows us to create a detailed and stylized world which literally bursts with liveliness. And because we want our world to truly breathe, we dynamically adapt its colors. For example, according to the weather or the season. We are putting into Tonicum a lot of time, effort and mainly passion. We believe that when it finally releases one day, it will be for you an unforgettable experience full of adventure. If you would like to follow this journey with us, make sure to subscribe, leave a like and keep an eye on future devlogs where we will continue share the progress and behind the scenes development of the game. Thank you for being here and we'll see each other at the next devlog. See you soon.